Welcome back to a new year of DC Rap. I'm Pat Pobletti with WisPolitics.com, and my guest this week, in the very early days of the 117th Congress, is Representative Ron Kind. Congressman, thanks as always for taking the time.
Well, thanks, Pat. Glad to be with you. Happy New Year, and I hope everyone's staying safe back home in Wisconsin.
Yeah, to you as well. And so obviously we are a Wisconsin outlet, and you represent Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District. But I want to start today where the weather is presumably a little bit warmer, and that's in Georgia. So as we speak, media outlets have called one of the Senate runoff races for Democrat Raphael Warnock, and Decision Desk, among others, have projected that Democrat Jon Ossoff will win the other race. Now, with all the usual caveats that media calls aren't official, and the Republican candidates will have a bevy of legal options at their disposal to contest the results, it appears that we're on the precipice of the first unified Democrat government in Washington since the first half of Barack Obama's first term in office, with the alibi that, of course, there are going to be razor slim margins in both chambers. So turning this back to you now, and I'll keep this broad so you can approach it however you like, what should the priorities be for the next 2 years?
Well, it couldn't be more divided, Pat. First of all, it's literally going to be 50-50 in the Senate and just a few seats in the House separating the two parties. And that could lead to two different opportunities. One is complete gridlock, paralysis, nothing getting done, constant state of political warfare for the next 2 years until the next election cycle. Or, and I hope it's this, it demands more outreach, more listening, more respect across the aisle, find common ground, find issues where you can develop consensus on, get things done on behalf of the American people. Listen, that's the world I've been operating in ever since I came to Congress representing Wisconsin. One of the most bipartisan, one of the most independent members. There are ways for us to work together across the aisle to get things done. A divided government demands that to accomplish anything. And we'll see in the coming weeks just what type of attitude my colleagues take in their approach to this session of Congress.
So let's go into policy specifics a little bit, because when we last spoke, which was last month, ahead of the vote on a COVID-19 relief package, rather, you referred to it as a down payment and said that Congress should be doing more. So working off the premise that your party will narrowly control both the House and the Senate, what do you think should be in that next package?
Well, first of all, I'm glad we got the last package just done and did it in a bipartisan way because there was great need back home. I'm glad that we're providing some additional rebate checks to people who are struggling, help them pay bills, food assistance programs. We're running out of money. The paycheck protection for small businesses, our family farmers. I worked hard to make sure our family farmers qualified for the P3 program because they are a small business as well. Healthcare provider assistance, school assistance, all of this was desperately needed. And it should be good now in the coming months, but Congress needs to stay nimble and react to facts on the ground and to see whether or not we're still in the middle of an outrageous pandemic, taking lives, a high positivity rate. And if that's the case, then obviously we're not going to be able to open up the schools, open up the economy as quickly as we need to, and additional assistance may be needed at that time. So right now it's going to be kind of a wait and see, and Congress needs, I think, to be respectful and react to the facts on the ground in the coming months. And hopefully, and I pray this every morning when I wake up, we're going to be doing a better job in the vaccine deployment. We're off to a slow start. There needs to be much greater coordination at the federal and state level. The President Trump cannot just dump this on the state labs and expect them to solve all the problems. There's a crucial federal role. I'm confident that President Biden and his administration is going to step up finally with a national strategy on vaccine deployment so we can get this out as quickly and as efficiently and effectively as possible. That's the long-term answer to establishing herd immunity, getting our economy fully operational again, kids back in classes, our lives being brought back to normal. And we don't have any time to waste on that front.
So you actually kind of touched on my next question, because obviously it's not just control of Congress that's shifting, but of the White House as well. And you spoke a little bit about your expectations of the Biden administration when it comes to vaccination. More broadly, what are you expecting in terms of working with this incoming administration?
I think importantly for folks back home, they're finally going to have a president and administration who wants to be a true partner with our states and our local communities. someone who recognizes the role of a federal government to provide further guidance, assistance, coordination, national strategy in order to combat this. This virus knows no borders. It doesn't respect communities, doesn't respect political affiliation, none of that. And so this has to be a national approach because we are at war with a hidden enemy, this virus, no less than a war like the Second World War or the First World War. And that requires national strategy and coordination. And I'm confident we're going to get that from President Biden and his administration. And beyond that, listen, I've known Joe for a number of years. He believes in democracy. He believes in respect for our fellow human beings, regardless whether they voted for him or not. He believes in the institution of Congress and the important role that we play in partnering with any administration. So I know he's going to make the extra effort and go the extra mile to try to find common ground with our Republican colleagues and things that he'll be able to work with them on as we move forward. But that's always a two-way street. There has to be a willingness on the other side to also work with the administration where it's a reasonable request, where we can find common ground. They just can't go into lockdown mode and say no to everything. That's not what our country needs to defeat this virus and see a strong economic recovery.
So I've asked you a lot of broad questions about Congress, about the White House, about Washington in general. Let's close out with you and the 3rd Congressional District. What are your priorities for the next 2 years?
Well, listen, I think this virus has highlighted a very bad digital divide that needs to be closed. I'm on a national broadband expansion task force. And for the life of me, I don't know why it's taking so long for our country to wake up, make the investments we need to close that digital gap. It's important for our global competitiveness. We've seen the divide and the economic and education inequities that it brings. You know, talk to any parent who's had a child trying to study at home over the last year or so and how difficult that is. If we want telemedicine, we need broadband in rural areas. I represent obviously a large rural area. I'm still a co-chair of a Healthcare Innovation Caucus. Our goal is to bring healthcare costs down for all Americans, prescription drugs and otherwise, through greater care coordination. We've got to figure this out, or rising healthcare costs will not only bankrupt family budgets, but it's going to bankrupt our nation, especially with the aging population. I'm hoping infrastructure investment is something that in the past has enjoyed wide bipartisan support. That too needs to get addressed. We're still facing a family farm crisis in Wisconsin with chronically low commodity prices. It's a crucial part of our state's economy. I've been one of the leading voices in support of family farms and making sure we're doing it in a sustainable fashion. And then the existential threat of climate change. We just don't have the luxury of ignoring this issue. And again, there's areas of bipartisan recognition, more we can do. Through the tax code, the committee that I sit on, incenting the development of sustainable and renewable energy resources. I mean, solar, wind, the price of that per megawatt has come down dramatically, but it's cheaper now than traditional coal or natural gas. And we need to be clever enough in order to tap into that potential and the jobs that will come from that investment too. And I certainly know folks back home care about these issues. And there are obviously going to be more local issues too. Flooding that we're seeing in western Wisconsin has been an ongoing problem for us. So there's going to be a lot to address. And I know that through history, my work here, there's an opportunity to reach across the aisle, partner with my Republican colleagues, get a lot of this done, including within the Wisconsin congressional delegation.
Congressman, we always wrap up by opening the floor to our guests. So what's on your mind that political insiders should be thinking about?
Pat, my big concern is that the political environment is way too toxic. It's too nasty. It's bitter. This is not healthy for our democracy. We have to stop approaching politics by looking for enemies to oppose and to shout at and to harass and to intimidate. We're seeing that on the streets of Washington this week with the large gatherings. And these are angry people and threatening violence. And that's not what America should be about. Yes, we're going to have honest differences of opinion on policy, what the best idea is for the future of our country. That's all part of a democracy, and it can get messy sometimes. But the level of animus and hatred that I see right now cannot be sustainable, and it's very dangerous. And the challenge that we're going to see in Congress today on the Electoral College vote is an abuse of our constitutional prerogative and power. Now, Donald Trump isn't going to win these challenges today. But I'm afraid, as Paul Ryan is, as Mike Gallagher is, as Reed Ribble, a former Republican rep in Wisconsin, they've all made very important statements on this fact that it's the precedent that's being set now, that if your preferred candidate doesn't win, it must only be because of election fraud, and that the game was stacked, and that there was some illegal behavior taking place. If we lose the ability for a peaceful transfer of power in our democracy, and that is what's being challenged on the floor in Congress today, democracy dies and dictatorship reigns. And I'm not overstating it. I'm not being overly melodramatic in this fashion. We have a tendency in this country to treat our democracy like it's a football, that we can kick it around all the time. Well, it's not a football. It's more like an egg. And if you break it, good luck trying to put it back together again. And that's been my greatest fear with President Trump questioning the results of the election with no evidence, with no facts. He's been rejected 60 times in court, including 8 times with court challenges in Wisconsin. And yet there's this attitude that's pervasive with his followers that this was a rigged election with no facts to back it up. And that's very dangerous. And I'm very worried about that. And we're going to need to figure this out for the sake of our children's future in this country.
Congressman, thank you so much again for taking the time to join us.
Thanks, Pat. Happy to do so. Stay safe.